Hello everyone, and welcome back to the introduction to the UE4 Editor video series. In this video we're going to talk about moving objects. In the previous video we talked about placing objects, so next on the list is to actually move those objects. So we have our basic scene here. I'm going to create a new level so that we can start from scratch and take a look at how to move objects in our scene. So I'm going to go to File and New Level and select Default. And inside my new level here we have our floor and a player start. I'm actually going to kill this player start because we don't need it. And we included starter content in this project, so we have some static meshes and things to work with. So I'm going to go into starter content and under props, I'm just going to grab a chair and drag that into our level here. So now that we have a chair in our level, I'm going to use the W, A, S, and D keys and hold the right mouse to fly around to the other side. And you can see that we have this little blue, green, and red widget here in the middle of our chair here, and this is the move tool. This allows you to move objects around in the scene. By default, it should be there. If you do not see this key, you can see this gizmo, you can press the W key on your keyboard to jump to it. For example, if you were in scale, or excuse me, rotate or scale, you can press W to jump back to the move key, or you can press the icon at the top of the viewport here. So moving objects in the viewport here can be done by left clicking on one of these arrows and just dragging it in the direction that you want to move it. So these red, blue, and green arrows represent the X, Y, and Z, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner of your screen here. This shows the axis that you're moving your objects along. So right now we're moving it along the Y, and the red arrow along the X, and the blue arrow along the Z. Now you can also move in multiple axes at the same time. If you zoom in a little bit, you can see it a little bit better down here. In between each arrows, if you click right there, you can move in both directions now along the Z and the Y, or you can click here and move along the Y and the X along the floor without moving it along the Z. Or you can also click in the middle here, this white little ball in the middle. If you click on that, then you have absolute control of where you want to move it. So that's the basic concept behind moving. There's a couple other things that we can talk about here. Quick hotkey time. If you press End on your keyboard with your object selected, it will make it jump back down to the floor. Just a quick little handy little key to make it jump back down to the floor there. So there's one thing that we want to talk about. We want to talk about moving in world space versus local space. And what exactly does that mean? So right now we are in world space. We are moving our object along the Z in world space. So we have it up in the air. And say, for example, this chair was rotated on its side. Let's actually demonstrate this. We're not going to talk about rotating too much right now, but if you want to follow along, you can press E and then grab this little widget here and turn it to about 40 degrees on its side, and then press W again to go back to the move tool. So in world space, we are moving the object along the Z here, but what if we wanted to move the chair out in this direction along the Z? Well, that's where world space versus local space comes into play. You can click this little globe icon up in the upper right hand corner. This changes between world and local space. So once I click it, you can see that the move tool changes, and now if I move along the Z, I can move it in that direction, local to this object. I can go back to world space and move it again in world space. Now there's a shortcut for toggling between those two. If you hold Control and the tilde key, which is the key next to the 1, you can cycle between world and local space to move your object. So let's talk about another method you could use to move your objects. We talked about this gizmo here and world versus local. You can also move objects via the details panel for the object. So you can see here we have this transform section. This contains location, rotation, and scale. For the purposes of this video, we're only going to be talking about location, but really quickly I'm going to zero back out my rotation so that it's perpendicular, and I'm going to press, once I'm in the viewport here, End again to get it back down to the floor. And for the X and the Y, I'm just going to punch in 0. And Let's just make the Z 20, just so it's an even number. So you can see now we have X and Y set to 0 and our Z set to 20. And again, you can punch in any value that you want for the location of your object. So if I wanted 30, I can hit 30, and you see it moves my object 30 centimeters along the X. Again, if I hit 200, it jumps up 170 centimeters from my previous location. Now this brings up an interesting time to talk about how space is measured in Unreal Engine 4. By default, one Unreal unit is 1 centimeter. So again, in the example we just gave, we jumped from 30 to 200, which gave us that 170 centimeter movement along the X. So again, that's how you can move objects via the details panel, just by punching in any value that you want. And there's also some drop downs here. If you click the little drop down button, you can see that you can change the location type between relative and world. We're not going to get into this too much because this is a little bit outside the scope of the introduction to moving. But this will allow you to jump between the absolute position in a world space or relative to a parent. Those of you that are already familiar with transforms should have a better understanding of how this works. But for the intro user, you won't have to worry about that too much. Moving right along, we have another important aspect to moving. That's referring to grid snapping. This is useful for aligning things like walls to construct a room or constructing roads together, for example. So right now we currently are set to 10. If you look at the top up here, the position grid snap value is currently set to 10. So we are moving 10 units each time we move an object in our level, but we can change this. If we click the little drop down, we can change it to 100. So we're moving in 100 increments, or we can lower it and go all the way down to 5. And it's a little bit smaller of increments, or you can move it all the way down to 1 and you're barely going to notice the grid snapping there. Or you can disable grid snapping altogether just by clicking this little icon in the middle here. That will allow you to move the object freely along without any kind of grid snapping at all. But it's up to you if you want to use how you want to use grid snapping. Again, it's useful for constructing buildings and making sure things are aligned properly. Again, it's up to you how you want to use it. There's also the editor for snapping options. We're not going to get into that either. That's really more of an advanced feature, but you can experiment with that once you're more familiar with grid snapping in general. It's up to you to kind of play with that and see if that's something you want to work with. So to recap, moving, basically press the W key to enter the movement mode. And use the widgets here to move your object, dragging along the Z and the Y and the X, grabbing in between to move it in 2 axes at once, or in the center to move it freely. You can press end to make it jump back down to the floor. And we also talked about local versus world. It's not really apparent there unless we press E and rotate it. So now if we go back to move and we toggle between world and local space, you can see the widget changing and how we want to move it. And we can also modify the location through the details panel. So let's zero all these out, set that to 20, and zero out our rotation as well. And there's our chair back on the floor. That's going to wrap it up for moving objects. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video.